Hi everyone, I'm Stephanie Weaver coming to you from Quarantine Kitchen here in San Diego, California. I'm the author of the Migraine Relief Plan. I'm a home cook, recipe developer, and cookbook author. And I created this series, Quarantine Kitchen, to help people figure out what to make, what if they need to buy stuff, what they need to buy, how to save money, how to not go crazy, and how to not burn your food, basically. So trying to cover some real basics. And so this is the third part of this kitchen tools series where I wanted to talk about really important appliances. And I know everybody has a different setup in their kitchen. You might have super limited space, really limited counter space, might have very limited budget as we do right now. So I just wanted to kind of go through what I feel like are essential things or what are nice to have. So if you are thinking about ordering anything, you kind of have some sense of what might be useful. So let's start, it's not in view, but microwave. Most people have a microwave, not everyone. We have one that's a relatively small, kind of a dorm size, because our kitchen is not super big and we don't have anything built in because this kitchen was built, we think, in the 50s or 60s. So we use the microwave all the time. We use it to heat up water, we use it to heat up leftovers, we use it to steam vegetables with some water. Super awesome cooking device, and no shame in using your microwave at all. Just make sure you don't microwave in plastic or with plastic on top. So put it in a plate, on a bowl.
What do you use for splatter then?
So then a piece of wax paper on top, or a napkin or a paper towel. Any of those things will work to keep it from splattering. So microwave, A-okay, and it's perfectly fine for you. It does not harm your food at all. Let's talk about blenders. So this is a super fancy blender called a Vitamix. You do not need something like this. For many, many years, I had an Oster blender. It was perfectly fine. When I got into food blogging, I started getting sort of blender envy, and I ended up having a big yard sale and got rid of a whole bunch of stuff, and I sold a bunch of stuff on eBay, like my Barbies and stuff, to earn enough money to buy this blender and this food processor. So, even somebody who cooks every day, I think of this as a splurge. And I bought a reconditioned one. Even reconditioned, they're like $350, which is why I sold a bunch of stuff to buy it. However, it's a fantastic tool, and there's other brands that are these high-speed blenders that are great, but you do not need them. You can have a normal, regular blender, perfectly wonderful, or if you don't have a lot of space, an immersion blender is fantastic. It cannot make a smoothie in the way that a regular blender can, but it can puree soup, it can make sauces, it can blend Mexican hot chocolate. I use it for all the time. You can put it in a pot of soup and puree your soup. It won't get you the texture that this will, but it's also way less expensive and much smaller to store. So those are some options in terms of blenders. Now, a lot of you may have a toaster oven. Again, not a lot of counter space. We do not have a toaster oven. But if you have one, fantastic to use. You can make a batch of cookies, freeze portions of the dough, just make 6 cookies if there's just a couple of you. Great for portion control. You can bake all kinds of things in your toaster oven. It has usually a little baking tray. Often there's a wire, kind of a wire tray. You can use that to set that on your counter and use it as a cooling tray. So there's lots of things you can do with your toaster oven that's awesome. And then mixers. So I do have a KitchenAid stand mixer. It's too big and bulky and heavy and wouldn't fit with everything else on the counter. That's again, after I became a food blogger, I started getting KitchenAid envy, and I found one that was for sale on Craigslist. And we drove out to, where did we drive? Lemon Grove or something?
Yeah, a half hour or more.
Some poor guy's house who had gotten divorced, and he was depressed, and it was his ex-wife's, and he wanted it out of the house, and we kind of joked that we rescued it from a broken home because it was just a very sad situation. But it's a fantastic tool. Do you need it? No, you do not. Something like this is perfectly fine. This was my mom's. These pop off, so you can clean it real easily. It doesn't take up a lot of space. They're great for licking. So yeah, you don't need a KitchenAid. A KitchenAid mixer, a stand mixer. I didn't have one for probably the first 30 years I was cooking. So definitely not an essential product. Now, the last thing, or there's two more things I want to talk about. One is the slow cooker or versus Instant Pot situation. Now, if I was living I've had some very small studios in New York, in Chicago, and if an Instant Pot had existed back then, that would have been probably the one thing I would have bought, because you can make a lot of stuff in it. You can steam things, you can kind of braise things, you can use it as a slow cooker. It's not ideal. Doesn't work quite as well as a regular normal slow cooker, but it totally has that function. You can make yogurt in it, if that's your bag. So it's a fantastic tool. You do not need it, however, if you have a few other things. And it's certainly like a nice thing, but they often will be on sale. And so if you're thinking about, is that something that would be helpful for me? If you start really getting into cooking, especially if you're plant-based and you're making a lot of beans and stuff, it makes fantastic beans pretty quickly. It'll cook garbanzos in about 25 minutes that have been pre-soaked, which is, usually it takes about 2 hours to cook garbanzos on the stove. Very energy efficient. They use them in Europe all the time, this type of, and there's plenty of brands. You don't have to buy the Instant Pot. But yes.
Is there anything you wouldn't cook from your trials?
Yeah, so I don't love pasta in it. And what I'm finding is that the rice setting, like if you like really sort of sticky rice, there's a recipe I have that I can post that's turmeric rice with chicken or turkey meatballs, and it makes beautiful textured meatballs because it steams them, but the rice is kind of sticky. Now, if you like your grains kind of more discreet, meaning they stay separated, what I would recommend doing is cooking it in more water and then draining it and letting it steam after it's been drained and fluff it. Because that's the one thing, and I've never had, and that you can make supposedly cheesecake, you can make bread pudding. Every one of those recipes I've tried, aside from the having to try to pull out a hot pan out of the thing that's steaming, it is, I've never liked the texture. I just would much rather cook it in the oven, but I have an oven. So if you, again, very small apartment, don't have an oven, like you lived in a studio in LA that didn't have an oven, this might have been a really good tool for him to have up there to make some dinners when we were living apart. And we weren't separated, I should be clear.
We like being in lockdown together.
We do like being in lockdown together, especially because we had to live apart for 6 years. But this would have been a great tool for you.
I worked in LA.
He worked in LA, and he was only home on the weekends. So again, it just depends on your situation. When these go on sale, so this is a 6-quart size, which is great if you want a bunch of leftovers. You can buy a smaller size. If you're just cooking for one, you could get I think they come in a 3 or 4 quart. That would be perfectly fine. And when they're on sale, they're in the $65 range. So not a super expensive appliance, certainly much less expensive than something like this. Okay, and then my last thing is definitely something you do not need, but you may be wondering about it. So food processor is very helpful. I do use it a lot. When I had a small studio, I had something more like this, which I would call a mini chopper. You might notice that it is highly stained with turmeric root, because that's what I mainly use it for, is chopping up my ginger root and turmeric root, which I then put in the freezer. I did a demo of that last week to make ginger turmeric honey. So this is helpful to chop up herbs, to chop up vegetables, to puree vegetables, to make applesauce. What else do I make in there? Hummus. Mm-hmm. So something this size would not work for hummus, but this is but you could also use a blender for a lot of those things too. So if you're trying to make a decision, I would probably go with a blender and maybe a mini chopper.
That you do with the little mini one in front of you?
Oh, and then this is, okay, thank you, because I would have forgotten, because I tend to do that. So this is actually a coffee grinder, also a spice grinder. Right now it mostly smells kind of like cinnamon, maybe, and cloves, which is the downside, is that it does sort of pick up the flavor of the spices. So purists, if they're coffee people, which I'm not, would have one for coffee and one for spices. But I didn't have one of these. These cost about $30. I didn't have one of these till about 5 years ago, because I thought, why would I need a spice grinder? I have a mortar and pestle. I can grind things myself. Oh my God, I love this thing so much. So if you start getting into, say, Indian food, this is fantastic. You can toast up your spices and then grind them. It smells amazing. You can make your own masala. You can make your own curry powder. It is pretty fabulous for doing things like that. But that is not normal everyday cooking. And normal everyday cooking is you buy your curry powder or you buy your, chili powder or whatever. So, but yes, I do love this. You can tell the top has hit the floor a few times, and I don't even know if they sell replacement tops. So Bodum, if you're listening, let me know if you sell replacement tops. But then you can't wash it, so you just wipe it out because it's electronic, right? So you have to just wipe it out with a damp towel. Everything else pretty much. Oh, and then my waffle iron. Just wanted to showcase. Okay, so if you love waffles, you probably already have one of these, and if you don't bother. But if you have one of these, you can make paninis in here. Did you know that? You can make grilled cheese in here, and you can take tater tots and shove them in there and make delicious tater tot waffles or tot waffles. Waffles, yes, which sounds dirty somehow. Anyway, so again, not essential unless you really love waffles, in which case you probably already have one. But it does have multiple uses: panini, grilled cheese, tot waffles. Okay, so thank you so much for watching. This is part 3 of Essential Kitchen Tools in Quarantine Kitchen with Stephanie Weaver. Please follow me, Stephanie Weaver MPH, on Facebook if you're not already doing so. If you thought this was useful, please share it. And if you're following me, if you'd like to follow me, I'm on YouTube. That's Stephanie Weaver is the channel. And S Weaver MPH on Twitter and Instagram. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you guys again soon. Please be well. Take care of yourselves. Bye.